All right, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting of the Southampton Village Planning Board to order. Could I have a motion to begin the meeting?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We're going to switch the order of the agenda just a little bit because Mr. Lemansky has to recuse himself from the Rogers Memorial 91 Coopers Farm Road site plan due to his involvement with the drafting of the plan. So we will begin with that. Kathy, if you could give us sort of a quick update of, since this is a new application, on what it's about, and or should we let the applicant do that first?
If you could, let the applicant do that.
Agent for the applicant.
Thank you.
Hi, Richard Warren of InterScience. I'm here on behalf of the library. I'm a former trustee and former president of the library, so this is part of my give back to the library as well. Here's an aerial photograph of the library site, Cooper's Farm Lane and Windmill Lane. And what the library is looking to do is to construct a small cafe. It's actually a one-room addition. It'll be located right in this location right here. If you know the library, there's a long exterior colonnade entry. You enter the library right at this point. And they would build a little room off to the side here, about 427 square feet, so a little bigger than 20 by 20. There seems to be a change in the way libraries, where it used to be that you go in the library and you can't take any food, you can't take any water, you can't have any of that. And over time, libraries seem to have progressed to a point where they are allowing people to have food in there. So what they're looking to do is build a little small cafe where someone can get a cup of coffee, somebody could buy a prepackaged muffin or a cookie or something, a little snack. If they're in the library, they could go out and take a little break from the research or whatever they're doing. It'd be a place for parents to meet their kids who are coming to the library as part of the programs that are put on there, which you probably see from the newsletters that go on. We have a series of plans that have been prepared. Here's the survey that you have in your file done by Squires and Holden. So this is the small addition right through here. This is the entry area coming down, and then there's a little pergola that goes around the outside to just kind of tie it into the architecture of the building. Plans have been prepared by Steve Lemansky, Southampton Engineering Services. So essentially what it is you come in this entry, there's a door here. This is the actual entry into the library. A room right here, there'll be 4 little tables. There's a counter here, there'll be a coffee machine, there'll be a refrigerator, so someone can get some milk out for their coffee. And they haven't quite figured out how they're going to do the prepackaged food services. There may be a vending machine, but their intention is to have a local vendor supply that. This is not going to be something that is going to become, in a way, the responsibility of the library. They're going to hire someone to manage this. The cleaning service will clean it, but the food and that kind of stuff would be like a local deli or someone that comes in and provides, prepackaged food for people that would come in here. It's a relatively simple project. It's in a location on the property where you won't be able to see it from the street because the building is completely blocked. You've got the 2-story facade of the building here from Windmill Lane. Cooper's Farm Lane, you come around through here and you won't be able to see it until you're actually in front of the library. This entire perimeter on the west side has large landscaping. You can't even see these buildings from the parking lot. So it's a small little facility to help the existing patrons of the library. It's about 426 square feet that would go on here. So we're looking for site plan approval. We would, since it is so small, the existing library, just to have a sense of scale, the existing library is about 16,000 square feet. It's got about a 12,000 square foot footprint, something like that, and it's 2 stories. So it's a pretty big building. This is just a small minor addition to it. We have an application for the health department because we have to tie into the waste system, which is relatively straightforward. The wall, the companion wall is where the plumbing is, so they just have to put a pipe in there for the sink.
Did you say you don't have to go to the health?
No, we do. We are before them right now. It's a relatively simple thing. Because we have a sink and it's a commercial building, we have to tie into
So increased dimensions of the building don't infringe on any of the lot line requirements?
No, doesn't affect any setbacks, doesn't affect any lot coverage limitations. It's completely compliant.
Are there any plans for chairs and tables to be placed outside for people to?
No, I think they're talking about putting some benches out there so somebody could like sit in the sun, but this is really meant to just be a little place for somebody to take a break from the research that they're doing and go get something to drink. They didn't want to put it inside the library proper. This way it's a little bit isolated, so there's a little bit more meaning when somebody takes their sealed cup of coffee from there into the library. It's not a little bit like a food free-for-all. It's something that's confined. So.
Any questions?
Seems like a great idea. I think it would be better being bigger to service the community. It just seems like,
They wanted to be sure that they weren't going to compete with local businesses.
No, I understand.
And this thing is probably about that big. You know, it's like 24 by 20 or something, so it's probably not much bigger than that.
right, and I happen to frequent the library, so I know it's pretty popular, so I would think that may end up being a very popular spot.
Well, if it is, then we'll be back to see.
Thank you. Kathy, have you had a chance to review the plans?
Hi, just quickly tonight, but they're very complete from what I can tell. And so I would say that if a public hearing is required, then we get it on for public hearing for next month. So if there's any comments in the meantime, that we can communicate with the applicant, but.
Given our experience with the health department, it's probably not going to be that soon that you get approval, so I don't think it would delay things much if we did require the public hearing just to follow our procedures, and we can have it next month. So I don't anticipate any objection, but there may, you just never know, so that would move things along.
Okay.
Okay, so maybe if we hold the public hearing, if you don't have any concerns with respect to it, maybe hopefully you could be thinking about approving
Yeah,
this.
normally in those cases, we can do a condition approval.
This is all volunteerism for all of us that are putting the time and energy
Right,
in
I
this.
think
so-
it's required. I mean, there are times when you can waive it, but when it's something new,
Right.
Rich,
I
we
recommend
can,
it.
if Kathy, we'll have at the work session, we'll have a work session for July, and if Kathy can square her operation, can square it by then, we could have a decision tender, available for the 4th
Okay.
of July.
Okay. I know you can waive it, but I'm not going to fight you on that. You do have the authority under the code to waive it.
Thank you. We try not to do that unless it's a very extreme.
I just know you have busy agendas, you have a lot of things going on, and sometimes something that's inconsequential like this, you'd think you'd want to not clog up the calendar.
The only conceivable issue is that for that, those apartments there to the west, every time something's happened from the press over, occasionally, one of those people simply wants to appear. So we probably should go through the route, even for their library.
Okay. I'll be back next month.
Thank you, Rich.
that would be July 2nd.
Make a motion at the request of the applicant to adjourn this application for all purposes until the next meeting.
Schedule a public hearing for July.
And schedule a
2.
public hearing for July 2. Do I have a second?
I will second that motion.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you'd let Steve know, he can come back in.
Okay. I'll do that. Track them in.
So moving to the top of the agenda, we have a request for an extension from the Chappell Price 122 South Main Street application. I believe, Mr. Gilmartin, you've noted that the Health Department has caused you a bit of a delay, and that's the
Yes,
reason
and
for
we're still
this
delayed, correct.
request for extension.
Just take it.
To when is the request extended?
I put it in the letter, I asked for 3 months, I hope we don't need it. But we requested a 3-month extension.
That would be
To
the
September 3rd.
September 3rd, yeah. Yeah, so,
Their responses come in piecemeal, so they'll give you a response.
And they only come every 4 weeks.
Right, they can review
And then it
things
takes 4 weeks to come back.
And if we had a list in the beginning of the things that they wanted, could have gotten it to them. So we're in the middle of that, backing and forth.
So moving extension, petition of the applicant.
Move to approve the request of the applicant to extend
Move
the
extension to, as in his letter, which he states.
application for all purposes to September 3. To and including
All in
September 3.
favor?
Aye.
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 You also
Thank
have
you.
the subdivision on for the covenants from the original Chafel. They've been filed, and we're just waiting to get the filed copy back, which I'll provide to the office when I receive that. The first one under the subdivision.
Is that a question?
No, it's it's the same property, so.
Right, right.
Give it to them both now.
Oh, for the subdivision part.
Right, so the
And
Chafel
that's also going to
subdivision.
be, you wouldn't want to adjourn that for the same, not for the same reason, but just to put them together.
Yeah, well, the covenants are filed. We're
Right.
just waiting to get the confirmation back from the title company, and we'll provide that to the planning board office.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. So the public hearing for 550 and 554 Hill Street. At the previous work sessions, there were some questions that were brought up regarding the sketch plan and certain aspects of the sketch plan, particularly regarding the ARB's stance on the house to be demolished and the feasibility of running the driveway from the rear lot to the Captain's Neck Lane. Is there any public comment about either of those aspects of this application?
Gilbert G. Flanagan for the applicant. I also have Anthony Tohill here, who's my co-counsel on this. First of all, on the driveway from Captain's Neck Lane to service the rear lot, you may remember that during the CEQA process, your consultants had an engineer look at that driveway to make sure that the drainage could work and so forth, and he concluded, even at that stage, that it can work, and obviously that was the sort of thing that you'd normally take into account when you act on final approval, drainage, grading, things like that. So we're aware that that has to be addressed, and I think the consultant's memo mentioned that that would be one of the things we'd have to look at in the context of final approval. So we're fine with that, but it's been
Concern
looked
is
at.
that once the sketch plan is approved, in the event that it's not feasible, the entire plan has to be totally
That's
revised.
true, and we run that risk, but we have to go through that in order to get final approval. And as you say, your consultant's engineering firm has already looked at it, so it's not as if we're, holding a thumb up to the wind to see whether or not it works. So we think it works, our engineer think it works, consultants think it works. If it doesn't, then we have a problem. That's about it. I think the ARB issue, I'd like to discuss that a little bit later, but I believe that that has been asked and answered. There was an opinion rendered by the village historical consultant that went to the Architectural Review Board. The Architectural Review Board, you may remember, was an involved agency during the CEQA process, and they had no input or comments about that, so we believe that that's really been answered. The Board of Appeals also addressed it. So we really don't plan to do anything else in the context of the subdivision. Now, obviously, when we go to take the building down, we need to get permission from them. So that's about all I'll say on those two subjects. By the way, I just will say that there were some other conditions that your staff report recommended be part of final approval, and we were fine with those. We understand that you have the ability to request them.
Does anyone else have anything to add? Mr. Bregman?
Jeff Bragman for the objecting neighbors. I don't have a lot to add except to say that there was nothing really to look at when your consultant looked at the plan, because all they would have was the line of the driveway and some topo lines. We'd like to look at the road profile for that, and that was something I think the board is going to request, and it got batted back and forth, and then I think there was some discussion that it would come in for the final portion of the review. Seems to me to make more sense in the sketch plan phase to reassure yourselves that the road would work. And I would like to have our engineer look at it and comment on it, not just the topography, but the road profile itself. There is a steep drop-off. One of my clients is right adjacent to that property line, and I know that drainage is an issue that Mr. McFarland has brought up. And we're also going to have some input on the status of that house, because the record is not, there's a factual dispute about whether or not that is a contributing property or not a contributing property. And the point that we made was that your consultant, your local consultant, doesn't have the power to change a duly filed historic district that's now part of the state and national register of historic districts just by fiat, by saying, like, I don't think it's contributing anymore. So we're still interested in commenting on those two issues. I think it would be appropriate during the sketch plan phase. As I said in the last go-round, it seems nonsensical to approve a sketch plan when you don't know if that driveway will work. You've never seen the driveway. And the consultant has never seen a road profile for the driveway, and there are drainage issues that seem to be real. So we would request, however you do it procedurally, we want to take a look at a road profile and comment, give you some engineering comment, and comment on the other issue as well. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, I mentioned at the last meeting, we're at the sketch plan stage, as you know. If you take a look at Article 4 of the subdivision regulations, it specifically talks about what a sketch plan is supposed to look at, and it's fairly limited. And I would encourage you to study it carefully. I think your consultant's memo has also pointed out that one of the first things that you do is to classify it as a major or a minor subdivision. And because this is fewer than 5 lots, it's a minor subdivision. The sketch plan regulations also go on to say that even if it is a minor subdivision, you have the power to request some of the information that would be appropriate for a major subdivision. And the drainage and the design of the roadway is one of those, and we've agreed to that. As you can know from looking at other subdivisions that you've approved, many of which I've been involved with, those kinds of details, profiles, drainage, grading, and all of that are typically done in the context of final approval. The sketch plan approval doesn't give us the right to subdivide. All it is to look at the general design of the subdivision lots. If we can't satisfy the drainage and the grading for the driveway, then we'll have to come back to you. So you're not committing yourself irrevocably to this if there is in fact an issue. But I repeat, your consultant during CEQA did look at that very carefully, looked at the topography, looked at the elevations, and concluded that a driveway could be installed. So it's not a question of really whether it can be done or not. It's a question of when to do it. So I would encourage you to look carefully at this section of the code, which sketch plan is a very limited event, but it enables us to get more of the actual nuts and bolts of the subdivision design, which we're happy to do. So Mr. Bragman will have all the opportunity he wants to examine the driveway design and the other issues he's mentioned. We're not saying he can't do that, but we're saying that it's appropriate now to move forward with a sketch plan. Now, I understand that you don't have a full board here this evening, so I would not expect you to take any action on this tonight, but I would hope that my comments would be well taken.
At what disadvantage is it, Mr. Flanagan, to prepare the road engineering proposal at this point as opposed to later? I mean, it does seem to me like the whole plan of the subdivision hinges on that road, and that we should see what the road is going to be the engineering plan for it. Why is that a problem?
It's not required, it's not necessary. In order for us to satisfy you, that is the thing that is normally done, even if you look at the standards for final approval. Those are the things that are called for in final approval. That's what the code says. I'm not saying anything that the code doesn't say. I'm saying there's a procedure, there's a time and a way to do it, and we're happy to do it. But let's follow what the code says. We're not giving up the right, we're not denying Mr. Bragman the opportunity to review it, but there is a time and a place for it, which we will be happy to observe.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any further comment? So Kathy, you prepared a draft sketch plan approval, and Mr. Flanagan pointed out Ms. Gilmartin is not here. I'd like to give her the chance to review this and for the board to review this, and at the following meeting, as long as everybody's in concurrence, we can vote on this sketch plan resolution.
I called 3 hours ago. It's all the...
Right, so you haven't had a chance to review it either, yeah.
Oh, I read it. It just didn't, it's consistent with the recent passage of procedure we've been advised of, and for which, from time to time, there are representations about the procedures of what we're doing, of which there's apparent disagreement. We have to sit and listen to it. I am concerned. As you know, I think that in the context that is being presented to us, not what we're asking for, but what's being presented to us, that there is a higher than normal duty because of the applicant and the process that's been fired so far to do this meticulously. I do not think a letter in connection with an environmental review to neg deck the environmental thing from an advisor to the ARB is sufficient. I've said that a couple of times. It may be just fine, but it's not the duty that the applicant should meet. It should go before the ARB formally. We have had opinions of which we are all aware, both by being in present for the opinions, reading them, and hearing them in the public sessions of the ARB, where the historical advisor to the ARB reaches different opinions of that stuff that's been there for a long time. Even conflict with what David Emilita presented for the applicant as to the history and the maps and what was in Albany and what's in the village and what contributes and the time the stuff went in. I don't think that is the province of our board to decide. That's sadly up to those people willing to serve on the ARB. If they make a decision, that's fine. That's their area. Secondly, I am burdened by the video, the incomplete video that I found by requesting it from the village 3 or 8 years ago or something, about 10 years ago, where there was an active objection, I think presented at least verbally, in front of the ARB, not this board, to this driveway being access to the rear lot that's before us of both the back end of both 550 and 554, in which what I heard, at least in the only evidence of what exists, there's no file, there's no nothing else except a video. The last one, I believe, was in either late May or early June, before an approval was granted to put the house of the applicant where it is now in July, where the applicant, who was then the wife of the applicant, Carol, who was still alive, thank goodness, she said there was no intention to use the bottom of his property for application. I believe that's what it said. They wanted to move the house for driveway for her children and to deal with lights not shining in her kitchen from North Hill Street, for the reason she gave for as object, which the ARB didn't want to approve. If they've changed their mind, property owner can change his mind. Everyone knows I have an issue with this being an exception, I'm told. Oh, you told me with your research, and I have not the capacity to look at it exhaustively, there are very few easements granted for access like this. There's a preference when it's done in the village for flag lots, which is something our board gets stuck regulating. If this is a private easement at the time, the existence of a good driveway may be fine, but what happens in the future for the drainage and when it's downhill? It may not be as deep as I think it is, having walked it twice on both properties, but it's a real issue going into what used to. David Emilita agreed with me, the record should show from the village thing, this was the end of the drainage area historically of Hetty Creek. Everyone knows about it. There's a sewer there and everything else. It is not just a layup. We did not, to my attention, at every meeting of this so far, get an engineering report that approved it. We had nothing done. We were simply told by what Kathy wrote in her memos and the plans that went back and forth for the neg deck, this would be an issue in the future we would get to. Gil was absolutely right. It's in the future. Seems to me the issue in front of us is what's in the future? How do we, by what pieces do we do this? There was been some confusion about what was before this board to review, before it went back to the zoning board, and what comes back. People have said we've approved stuff that some of us vividly don't think was, quote, approved, because we were told it was coming now to be approved as a what I call a material rezoning change of what is laid out in the village zoning board between 3-acre, 2-acre, and 1-acre, and half-acre zoning. This is a tough transition area. It goes from 3 acres or more to one lot that is 2 acres, to the applicants that is over 1 acre, to supposedly to 1 acre, and we're going to extend, going the other way, a half acre against what are 120 acres to 80, R120s to R. And so that is not an immaterial land use issue. Given the fact that two boards are acting on both the zoning board and the planning board, that presumably have some say, I don't think it is controlled by either one definitively. There's going to be a difference on the neighborhood. All the data that we got and all the argument was, how many half-acre lots can you find near this property? There's nothing that's been presented to us. Maybe nobody cares. Then maybe we won't care in looking at the neighborhood. But of all the acres around, over half of them are R80 to R120 acres that border this property. Over half. And of the ones that are R40 or R20, all but one of them have presented counsel or arguments or come in person to say they are not happy with these plans for their neighborhood, for their properties. It's not hearsay. But it's been, I've reported, I've told everybody, everything that comes to me, I don't call anybody up. They all come to me and send me letters, have counsel for all that sort of thing. They put it at record, I recorded it. And I was told that rendered me in one approach to be ineligible to deal with this matter. We've had other members of this board that were said to be ineligible. The stakes of our duty has been raised by degree of difficulty. Maybe it shouldn't have been. Maybe it was going to happen anyway. I'm not responsible for that. But as the recipient, we have to be meticulous, above the normal standards that would apply to a passive one. These things exist. And you don't just have somebody walk out of a meeting and everything's all right. This has gone on for a lot longer than I've been involved. 5 or 6 years. I've only seen 2 and change. So we just have to meet the standards, and if we should leave these plans to go forward, if we're not have a vote tonight, go to the next one, that's fine. But I'd like to get it as organized as we can so we can make a complete judgment reflecting all of these issues, because they're coming at us from people anyway. Matters have been filed, I'm told. I haven't read any of them. It's not to my attention yet, but we have to do it. And I've got a strong recollection of what we voted on before. We only approved the fact that environmental damage here from even the current so-called plans, which we saw some of. It was not the first, it was the second, third, or fourth set of plans. That was okay. But the rest of it lies ahead of us now. You're experienced. You can decide if we can decide any of it now. We can do it later. We're going to do it at the work session. Do it after the 4th of July. We got to get this all done so that there's a really full review to the highest standards, because that's the burden we've been placed in. We didn't volunteer for this. That's my speech. But I've said that many times. I still think in work sessions, that's what we have to do. I can't cop it out.
Jane?
Well, I have to say, it has been going on for a very long time. I've only been part of it for under a year. And it seems, from what I've heard, is right now we're just deciding on some very basics, and we're going to address things later on. I don't know what is the protocol in the past, so it's very hard for me to make a decision on that. To me, it sounds like we're going ahead, but we have all these stop gates in place that we would take if need be.
Well, my preference would be to have the road solved now. Now, if Mr. Flanagan's correct and the procedure is to move on, I wanted, Mr. Robinson, at some point, if you could give me advice to the legal status of that request, because I think that the bottom line, it should be decided before we move ahead to see if the plan as it exists is valid or not. But if we can decide that later in the final approval, and if that's the way the process is meant to work, as Mr. Flanagan suggests, then let's do that. But again, I don't want to add the weight of the approval of the sketch plan to in some way indicate that I'm signing off on the road, because I think it still is quite a large question in the application until the actual drawing and engineering plans for it are done. Steve?
Well, I think this is a complete sketch plan approval, the way it's written, the way that everything is itemized, and we have additional requirements on this for elements above a minor subdivision, including the landscape plan and the lot layouts and this roadway design. So the approval basically states that the following are conditional and accompany the proposal. So there is a roadway design and a full roadway profile, and a SWIP plan, and also confirmation from the ARB regarding the historical significance, and to the state if necessary. So I think this is a very well-written approval where it covers all the bases. It covers what we've looked at over the years. It details what's required in the design. I don't see any problem with going ahead. I looked at the topo, and basically it's a 2% grade from the property to Captain's Neck Lane. So it would be okay for someone in a wheelchair to go up the grade. So I don't think it's that steep of an incline, and I think the drainage can be solved. So I think we get the full board here and take a vote, but I don't think there's going to be a problem designing the road and the drainage. If I did, I would say, let's take a look at that quickly, but because it's only just somewhere around a 2-foot grade on a, over a 200-foot run, it's a very slight slope. So it's not like you've got like there's some road over north, was it North Captains? Is it North Captains, or is it North, what's the next street over?
Bishops?
No, going west. Where you go across the road and
Lee Avenue
and it across from Lee, and there's another road that's
goes off to Hetty Creek.
and there's quite a big drop there.
Hetty Creek Lane, I think.
So this is nothing like that. This is
Captain's Neck and Hibby's Road is the only drop in the village.
yeah. So I mean, I think this is a complete written sketch plan approval, and I think we're covered on everything that Alan brought up in this last resolve part, where over and above the minor subdivision requirements, they're requiring 5 other things that basically we're saying to them, you need to do this, and then bring it back to us, and then we'll look at it.
Steve, I'd add a sixth being a unique creation of an easement as opposed to a flag lot. And that is, I understand, a visible exception to a history of planning inside the village for lots that are inside roads. It's been followed a long time, I'm told, with rare exceptions. I've asked for examples. No one's given me any yet, but I've asked for them. Because there'll be 5 different people here at some point who deals with access and whether these conditions work or not. But I think your 2 foot is not wrong, but we'll get the facts. It can be measured.
Okay.
There wasn't a lot of public comment, so I think it would be appropriate to close the public hearing.
Yeah, I'm sitting here trying to figure out the best way to address some of the questions and comments your board members have, specifically Alan. And we've discussed this before at various meetings, and somehow it turns into what are our legal issues. Permit me to offer these comments. There is a progression to these subdivisions, as stated in the code. And each step marches us forward and excludes certain things that have been decided by that step. And we're now at the planning board approval stage, which is subject to 5 conditions, as Steve just pointed out. So one of which is the condition regarding the roadway. And we've got the language as to what that would include. So Alan said a moment ago, we need to do what we have to do, which really doesn't help me try to help you guys, because doing what we have to do just doesn't solve anybody's problem. So in the interim period of time, I would ask you all to look at this. You're approving the sketch. You're approving the driveway coming up from Captain's Neck Lane that's going to be in the area designated on the subdivision proposal. So that driveway is going to be within the confines of that property. The issue then is, as you have raised, one of them is, well, is the drainage going to be sufficient? Do you want curbing? Do you not want curbing? As I said before, do you want to have a condition that there be no gravel on the driveway to keep down noise? But then maybe somebody else is going to say, well, we just don't want asphalt. Do you want to have a pervious surface or an impervious surface? All those things are issues that you could have in this driveway. But you've got to move forward with the driveway. And I understand what you said, Roy, we'd rather have it now than later. If you have it now, you don't need to have it later because you can decide it. But you're reserving the right within the confines of the condition to do that at some future time, to move this thing along. So as a legal counsel, I don't want anybody to be put off because they get to some point and say, oh, well, we should have had the driveway in some other place, because it's going to be in the place that it's now located. So that's something that we're not going to discuss in the future. We might discuss how many drainage rings the engineer says, or how many leaching pools, or if you have a curb, whether you've got drainage, whether you connect the pools. All those are going to be based on engineering statistics. But, again, it's something you're reserving for the future. And again, to say that, well, we have to look at it in the abstract, I ask you that you've got to be more specific as members to guide us what you want to do. Right? So if you have issues, you need to tell us, not just say, well, we have to do what we have to do, because we don't know what that is. I mean, in terms of what you're thinking of and the concerns you've got. So this says you're proving it. All these things are going to be approved. We talk about to shift gears a little bit, the houses. Now, that's been an issue for basically 3 years. There's not been a memo from the board or board members saying, we want an application or we want some definitive decision from the ARB. Now, how do we get a decision from the ARB? The applicant hasn't made an application to the ARB. If you process an application, you're going to have to pay a fee. Your board doesn't have the authority to pay the fee. It has to get the money from the trustees. The ARB can't alone take it upon itself to do this. It needs an application from an applicant in front of it. And that has to eventually happen. So I analyze this by saying, well, your planning board is very concerned about these 2 houses. But and as you said earlier, Roy, that's not the domain of the planning board, that's the domain of the ARB. This applicant eventually is going to have to go to the ARB to get permission to demolish those 2 structures. So what is the worst case that can happen to the applicant? The ARB says no. In which case, the applicant is going to say something like, we should have done this earlier. Now we may have to go back to the planning board, or we're going to have to go back to the planning board and rearrange the whole thing. In which case you guys are going to say, well, okay, we'll proceed with an application to rearrange it. But that burden is on them. So I'm a little bit wondering why that is such a prominent thing. The Board of Appeals dealt with it. We've dealt with it. I understand that we have just a letter from Mr. Studenroth, who is the consultant, but he did the review. He said that he reviewed the documents and found that all four other authorities that might have jurisdiction over this said they were non-contributing assets, which makes all the difference in the world. If it's a contributing asset versus a non-contributing asset. If it's a non-contributing asset, it's basically like it's just within the regular zoning code. But the ARB still has to pass on it because it's in the historic district. So somebody could help me by saying what worries the planning board members about why this is the way it is and hasn't been resolved. The applicant has seen fit not to proceed at this stage of the game with it. They eventually have to deal with it. And the board will decide on it. And the consequences will follow. So I understand your concern. I'm trying to address it. I wish I had better specifics for you, but you're approving a sketch plan which states certain things. It takes you to another level toward approval, and it's conditioned upon 5 items. If you have any problems with the road, I would ask you to please specifically tell us, rather than just say, well, we have to review it with no idea what we're really looking for. If we know you're concerned with drainage, are you concerned with surface permeation? Are you concerned with surface coatings, curbing, not curbing? Again, it's, I think, unfair to Kathy's group to say, well, what are your recommendations when we don't really know what your concerns are specifically. So if you could look at that, let us know. If you see another item that should be item 6 or 7 or 8, let us know. But it's a little bit difficult to then have us say, we think this is ready for approval, and you approve it, and then somebody comes back and says, oh, well, wait a minute, what about something else? We shouldn't be there. We need to decide these things now and move forward. So in the interim, I would ask you to all do that. If you have any questions about any of these procedures, call me, but please identify what specific aspects of this subdivision you feel should be further required or written as a condition to the sketch plan approval. Hope that's some benefit to you.
Thank you.
Counsel, if you asked me to approve this, I couldn't because it's an insufficient application.
Okay,
We
what is
don't
the-
know,
Alan,
we
what is the
don't
insufficiency?
know, and asked and been told, wait, on what the third, I believe, first ever easement, much less would be the third ever flag lot coming off all of Captain's Neck Lane entails in terms of all the things you mentioned. It has been objected to for over 10 years by neighbors. We're aware that the neighborhood finds it of concern. It is a steeper grade than because I've walked it, it's many feet drop from the back of the property down to the road, just because that's the way the land is. Drainage is to the next property, which is even lower. I'm sure something can be done. What are we approving? It may be that that's not the right way even to access this property. Maybe we should all come like it. Many lots have been. If you want to look at the history, many lots off Hill Street, most lots off Hill Street have been flagged, or they built roads for the famous, Roscoe area that comes up all the time. That was the solution to get to internal land. This is one of the first of its type to sort of work around it. Tell me how many flags come off Corcoran Street. This is rarely done. Because of the land they wanted, they made a road instead of flags off of Moses Lane. Flags off Moses Lane have been fairly rare. This is just, if you look at how the villages and the planning and what people want, we're stuck with this burden. The applicant has to do, we don't design this roadway. I'm not going to design the drainage. Steve
No,
knows how, because he's in this
approving
line of work.
You're approving a design.
I'm not ready to,
The board will be asked to vote on a design.
and I'll have to approve it or not, and I'll go with what the facts are, the balance of the facts as we see them. Most people come before these boards and are told, hey, you've got to design it. We're not in the business of making designs. I know it's a
Well, they're
gray
gonna do
area for
that.
some board. I'm not going to design this
No,
roadway.
they're going to do that.
Okay, if they do it, then if they do it and it works for this configuration of the lots, we'll approve it, or I'll vote to approve it, but I haven't had it yet.
No, they're saying they want this sketch plan approved, and then they will bring you back a design that
So
you can
you
approve or
just said to
disapprove.
me, if we approve this sketch plan, for instance, today, we've approved the road being a flag lot, an easement in from Captain's Neck Lane.
I said you're approving that configuration from
That's what you
Captain's
said.
Neck
Maybe
Lane.
we're not.
Yes, I did.
I'm not ready to approve that, because I'm not sure this lot that would be in front of us should have access from Captain's Neck Lane, period, because I'm not sure it makes sense for the neighborhood. The applicant probably can prove it, but maybe the same consultants have acted for both boards. Nelson Pope and Voorhees are fine people. They do full work for the ZBA, and they do full work for us. Between Kathy and Chick, difference of opinion. They're good people. I've seen them in action. But we can't, just because they're doing both boards doesn't mean it's necessarily both the same decision.
Alan, can I try and...
So if you want to say this is an approval of that road in from Captain Neck Lane, I'm going to have to
I
vote
said
no,
you're
because I don't
approving
think
the
the burden's been met.
location of the
The
road.
burden's been met. Location,
Yes.
having it.
Yes,
I
okay.
don't think that's been met.
Can I ask-
It's been before boards of this village for over 10 years, as what's there from the facts. We have almost no facts, but what's been submitted hasn't been met. The consultants did not come and tell us what it is. All the things you mentioned, sure, that's going to come, but we shouldn't get that from your opinion.
Not offering my opinion.
Okay, you gave us examples, but I'm fine.
I gave you
no
examples. I said you're approving a lot that has the depiction of where this lot will be accessed.
Yep, and I
Okay.
think that lot
Can I-
maybe should be accessed from Hill Street. They deal with the planning of changing the zoning.
I ask you a couple of questions.
Sure.
You mentioned flag lot, and then you mentioned access. I see the two as different. Do
Okay.
you disapprove of the fact that it's a easement or a flag lot?
Could be both. Give me the
No,
facts.
it can't be both,
Why can't?
because an easement is different than a flag lot.
I know that.
Well, that's why it can't be both.
You asked me what I'm going to approve.
No, I asked you whether you mean, when you talk about access, are you talking about access in the legal form of an easement or the legal form of a flag lot?
I can only say, given the record that's come before me, that I've seen this overdue both.
No, it's got to be one or the other.
I'm not approving either. Doesn't have to be one or the other. I may approve neither one.
Well, then that's the access. The area of the, I'm asking, do you have a problem with the legal concept of a flag lot or an easement?
The physical.
Or are you talking about where it's physically going to be located?
I'm talking, in the case of this thing, what I'm advised.
This case, yes.
Yes, and counsel, I have to say, Bo, honestly, both.
No, I'm saying, are you referring to the location of it or its legal status?
Both. I think there's a major issue for us to decide, if they give us all the facts, for its location of, there are two of them here. There's one off Hill Street and there's one off
We're
Captain's
talking
Neck.
about Captain's Neck Lane.
Captain's Neck, it's both. The one off Hill Street is one. I'm not sure that shouldn't be a flag lot and not an
I'm
easement.
not asking you about that, Al. I'm asking you about Captain's Neck Lane.
I said both.
Okay, you object to the where it's located.
Yeah, absolutely. And it may be located, and it may turn out on the facts is located fine, then I'm also concerned as the legal issue, mechanical.
Why
what
is
an
it
easement
legal?
is and what a flag lot is. I
The
think I know
legal
what they
flag
are.
lot is the fee simple of the pole,
I understand.
and an easement is not.
I understand.
Okay, so why do you prefer one or the other?
Absolutely.
Well, which one?
I think if you're going to do something like that in this village, given its history and the future, when the owners are separate people, having a flag lot is the best way to go. That's just an abstract decision. If you're going to ask me, fine. And I think, I've been told by advisors, lawyers, everybody else who work in the municipal law of this village, development and everything else, that flag lots on balance have been preferable, which is why that's occurred over and over again, and not easements to get access to internal lots, particularly off major streets. Maybe that's not true, but that's what I'm told has happened. And it makes sense to me. It makes land use planning sense to run a village and to deal with your neighbors, to strike the proper balance between the use of land when you're building more density with more residents that have access off traffic, which is what the streets are.
Say you prefer a flag lot access.
You asked me, that's my answer. What I understand makes the best sense from a planning point of view for granting people permission to build residences on lots that are
Okay, well,
removed
how
from
does it
streets.
make better sense in this context of this subdivision?
Excuse me?
How, in the context of this subdivision, does it make better sense versus an easement?
Because future control of what has happened for access to those lots, when the owners of the lots end up being different people, appears to be, from talking to counsel involved in this business over and over again, a much better way to do it than to deal with an easement, which we've got one in front of us, which is changing conditions attached to an easement. It is complicated, it takes forever, and that was for a different purpose, not for access to, physical access to a lot.
You're saying the owner of the flag would be responsible for maintaining, whereas an easement at the
And we're asked for things, remember? You gave us the opinion. What runs off? What if the neighbor's lower? What if the drainage goes in? What if you didn't maintain it? Who's responsible for it? If it's an easement and it's the guy, that's a discussion between private property owners, not between us and the village and everything else. People can write wonderful agreements on easements, and I can tell you, they're not always honored in any line of work that I'm aware of, be it land preservation or development or your neighbors or anything else. That's just life. That's a condition. That just, we write these things. They're just contracts, but the consequences of it are different. If you don't think so, you've got different experience, but that's been my issue among property owners, not just in the village, but I've never been involved in a dispute in this.
Well, I ask you again
New
to,
York, but I have been in other states. That's happened. That's life.
I ask you all then to prepare a itemization of what concerns you have so that they can be discussed in a final sense at the July meeting.
Okay. I'll do it again.
I have a question. Since I was not here for a good part of this, what decision for the easement, what board made that decision for the easement?
Nobody. Private property owner.
The easement is part of the plot plan that has been proposed. Kathy, is there enough room here to have a fee simple?
Meaning they subdivide the Captain's
Yeah.
Neck property? I don't believe so.
Like that wasn't a zoning board decision or something, that was
Bill, would
just...
you know? I don't.
Yes, it
yeah.
is.
It was? Okay.
I have to say, the zoning board, in granting those variances, when those variances were granted, that becomes the zoning of that property. So by the act of the zoning board, that easement has been approved legally. What you want to do in terms of the design of it, to make sure that it works, that's our burden. We have to do that. We have to go through all the expense of that. But again, I would beg you to look at what the subdivision regulations say when you do these things. I mean, the code sets steps out for a reason. So I would implore you to look at those sections, look at the sketch plan section, look at the section having to do with minor subdivisions. It's all there. We will comply with it. We have no problem complying with it. We'll give you all the information you want. If it doesn't work, it's our problem, and we know it. I don't know what more I can say. It's pretty straightforward.
That's true.
Would it be fair to say that whether it's a flag lot or an easement is not,
Well, that's what I'm asking. Alan, what difference does it make?
If this is the time to give hypothetical examples of facts,
Well, no, we don't want
I
hypothetical.
will.
We want it related to this piece of property.
No, to this piece of property. If water flows off this land down the drain when we get fairly...
No, Alan, what is the difference between an easement and the right-of-way is your concern? We're not talking about water flow, we're not talking about the mechanics of it at the moment. We're talking about what legal concept do you have an objection to over the right-of-way?
If you want to give me the hypothetical, I will try to respond to it. If there's an easement versus, I believe, that under the village code, and we've got experts here, especially Gil, who's one of the great experts in the village.
Well, he's proposing that there be a right-of-way.
May I finish?
Yeah.
Clearly not saying what you require here. You've given us lots of opinions here on all sorts of things, non-conforming use and everything, but now relax for a minute before I get angry. If there's an easement, there's a property owner's private right of contract. Its enforcement is between the property owners, and if it's a dispute, they seek remedy in various ways. Sometimes they even go to litigation. Sometimes they come here because there's an input that they've written into it which affects something to do with the village. You've been involved and we've been involved. They get resolved according to their terms. Flag lots, as I understand it, have an extra layer of regulation that applies. It applies in the village code, and its administration is with us. If people violate a flag lot, I guess it starts with the building commissioner to say, you've done it wrong, you've got to change the hedges, the drainage is bad, you're flooding your neighbor, you've got to do something about it. Their remedy lies external, generally speaking, in the first instance. Ultimately, you file articles and you cut people and you fight it out some other way. But it's external to the village to regulate the flag lots for people going in and out. There are issues related to the flag lots, such as traffic, who goes in and out, the curbs, access, where you go, how you go in and out. With this property, with major zoning on one side and minor zoning on the other, it's a transition property, the change of which will absolutely affect this neighborhood. No one can say it won't, because every neighbor has said so, except possibly for the applicant and one who has not registered their opinion that I'm aware of, not that I've sought, but have registered one way or the other through counsel or lawyers or volunteering it and so forth. Everyone is concerned what the outcome is here from a zoning point of view. Access seems to me to determine whether the rights will be just between the parties, a private contract, or well, it will affect the village and the use of these properties. People have talked about how bad Hill Street is, to give you an example that we all know about. And traffic, oh my goodness, it'd be so much better to have traffic not go more onto Hill Street. Okay, I understand that argument. Since I use Hill Street maybe more than any of you, I understand it in spades. It's an issue. So it's one of the things you might weigh. It might make more sense to finally get a access, we'll call it, forget which it is legally, off of Captain's Neck. There's only two all the way down to the beach so far, so maybe it makes sense to start to do it with that road. Good judgment for the village and the people that live there. But that's our job, to get the facts in front of us and we'll decide, I guess. So if you want to have me give you more illegal opinions, because I'm not practicing law here, and don't think I will, that's my view. There is a fundamental difference in it when it comes to land use for the neighbors and the remedy for what happens to a flag lot and the buffering and who's next to it and what might go wrong. If I'm the owner of all of it, I don't care. But you can't run this properly to decide these lots won't ultimately be owned by different people who might have differences of opinion. And if you set up something that makes sense, fine, and if not, you probably made a less than good judgment.
Well, I think you might as well go ahead and vote on the motion, Roy, and we'll deal with this next month.
Say again, Bob, vote in the motion to close the public hearing.
And adjourn for all purposes to next month.
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye. $83 next.
Say again.
$83.
Right. Public hearing scheduled for 83 Fowler Street LLC. That's the original. We need to put that in the file.
This is the original of Kathy, no?
Oh, there's a one there?
Yeah, this is
Kathy's original.
Kathy's original.
Hello.
Hi, Bailey Larkin with Bennett and Reed. I just submitted the affidavits of mailing and posting. This is an application for a 2-lot subdivision. The property is about 5.2 acres located in the R80 zoning district. It's located on Fowler with frontage on Phillips Pond. The applicant's proposing a conforming subdivision with a front street lot that's about 87,000 square feet and a back flag lot that's about 140,000 square feet. There's going to be a flag strip extending from the south side, basically, of the property to the back lot. Sketch plan approval was granted by this board pursuant to a February 5th resolution. Since that date, they've obtained Health Department approval, and we've submitted a copy of the Health Department approved plan along with a draft covenant. This board had asked that we covenant the wetlands area from any disturbance in the future, which is part of the record. We have been before this board for sketch plan approval and also for tennis court approval on this property as well. The back lot is under development, and they've received variances from the Zoning Board of Appeals for an accessory structure in a front yard, and obviously site plan approval from you for the planning board. There's not much to add. I think we've received a memo from Kathy asking that the final plan include the meets and bounds description of the wetlands area, and that meets and bounds description be incorporated into the draft declaration of covenants that we prepared, which obviously we can take care of. But I don't know if there's questions from the board or...
Everything meets your requirements, correct?
That's correct, yes.
It had to do with the markers.
And the covenants and restrictions, that review could occur as a condition of approval. It certainly does.
Anyone in the audience have any comment upon this application? I have a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We will schedule for decision, and we'll take care of that next meeting. Mr. Gilmartin suggested that we, William and Nancy Schaffer, 122, 132 be adjourned pending the resolution of the Health Department request. So could I get a motion to do so?
So moved.
Wait, let me just correct that. That was for the earlier one. This one has to do with filing the covenants.
Didn't he say that's already been done?
They have, but he is awaiting confirmation from the county that he will submit to the planning board so we can close out.
Yeah, he put that in the end of his speech,
Yeah. So that was for this one.
We're combining it.
So he did ask for an adjournment, but it was for that reason, not
Okay.
for the health department.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Let's adjourn it to the August meeting, just in case.
Okay. Make a motion to approve the request of the applicant to adjourn for all purposes.
The August regular meeting.
The 122, 132 South Main subdivision to the August 6th public hearing, July 30th work session.
Have a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Cowles Associates, 477 Little Plains Road. This was an application that we approved for subdivision back in 2014.
Is it the same direction? No.
No. Bailey Larkin for the applicant. We received conditional resolution approval for final approval of a 2-lot subdivision at 477 Little Plains. Zoning Board of Appeals granted variances for this property. It was originally 2 separate lots located in the R80 zoning district. When the area was upzoned, the properties merged because they were never transferred out of the same name. So a variance was granted from the Zoning Board of Appeals to subdivide the lots along the existing lot line. It's actually still on the Suffolk County tax map as these 2 individual lots. And sketch plan approval was granted, and then final conditional approval from this board. The applicant did not comply with all the conditions of the approval within the time frame that was given in the decision. So we're asking for reapproval of this subdivision.
You're looking for input?
Yes.
I would say, I reviewed this, it is identical to what was approved. I think we have to, again, have a public hearing on this. I would recommend do it as soon as possible, get it on for July 2nd.
I think even if there wasn't any public suggestion then, we need to
Yeah.
It's just per code.
The letter says northeast, it's the northwest corner.
Correct.
The letter says northeast under discussion.
Oh,
I think
it
it's
should-
got the corner
Yes.
wrong.
It
Should
is
be northwest.
Northwest, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we have a hearing.
So let's do that.
Make a motion to schedule a public hearing for the Cal Associates 477 Little Plains Road to the July 30th work session, August 6th public hearing.
July.
I'm sorry, July
2nd. meeting.
July 2.
June 25th work session, July 2nd public meeting, sorry.
Perfect.
Yep.
Thank you.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 For lot line modification, East End Holdings at 32-42 Jobs Lane. I see you've got a new review in the file, Kathy.
Yes. So all of the, other than the one comment that I have related to the Village Business District requirements relating to building height and continuity of that building height, it can't
This is the
extend.
length problem. when
Right,
It
it
goes too
can't-
long.
It can't extend more than 65 feet at the same height without a change of 3 feet. So this is additional relief that's required, otherwise they have to go back to the drawing board and change the design. So I would expect they probably will go for relief, but it's up to them. And then there are a number of engineering comments. One has to do, one that the planning board should weigh in on has to do with the use of the cellar area, because there is cellar area that's proposed to be, I think it's 9 foot 6 inches, so there's plenty of room down there for more activity. And they are only proposing use of 30% of the cellar for storage, and the rest for mechanical, which you don't need flow, design flow for. And if they use more than that for storage, then they technically should have a greater, they need more flow. And so they're restricted to the 300 gallons per day per acre limits. So it's something that the health department would weigh in on, and the applicant has suggested that this be enforced by covenant, but actually it would be enforced by the building department. I would say it would be something that would be included on the CO at that point, that, only 30% of the basement would be used for storage. So,
That sounds fine. How does that ever get enforced
I don't
by
know.
my grandchildren? What's the practice?
It's really, they rope it off, I guess, I don't know. So, maybe you can enlighten us, so.
If I can say a couple of things about that. We have had discussions with the health department about that, and as far
On partial use.
yeah, and in fact, I think they will require covenants and restrictions. Now, one thing you might consider doing, in addition to the health department having the ability to enforce them, if the village wanted the ability to enforce them, that could be incorporated in those covenants, so there'd be double protection there. The other issue that Kathy mentioned about the length of the building without a break in the roof line, we have actually redesigned the building to have a break in the middle, to have a gable in the middle, so that we
Okay.
You should have those
Is
drawings.
that, I'm sorry, I didn't get a chance.
They really?
Have those.
Yeah, we have.
Yeah,
So
for
we-
some reason it didn't get to me in time.
This one?
So we have addressed that.
Okay, great. Okay.
I mean, I think this is the only way out for them because they're limited by the 300 gallons per day.
Yes,
They've added 2 IA systems.
I know.
So
No,
it's-
it's wonderful.
Those are the ones that everybody wants.
Right, right. And it's actually one of the, it's the Fuji system. There's only 2 systems of the 5 that are hitting the numbers. And the Fuji's one of them, so.
That's the gable?
There it is, right?
Yeah, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't see that.
It's like they're stuck between a rock and a hard place on that. And to say that using a little bit more of the basement is going to create more waste flow, I don't even agree with.
I don't even get that.
No,
It's their rule. They have .03 gallons for
That's what it is. We have a formula.
storage and .05 gallons per square foot for office. So they're trying to hit the numbers to, try to keep things under control. But the IAs in this Fuji system, I just saw some data on it that the health department sent out last month. And it's hitting the numbers, so it's taking all the nitrates out.
No, this is great.
So I would hope that, as per our discussion at the last meeting, that maybe we could schedule a public hearing for this one.
I would recommend that at this point. I mean, the application technically isn't complete because it has a couple of outstanding engineering comments, but I think it would benefit from a public hearing at this point. And
the
there's no
main
reason-
one, your engineer's main one seemed to be, he still thought there might be some residual, that sounded to me like sort of off-the-roof water flow issues.
I think it
Water
more,
going the wrong way, sort of in the back. Otherwise,
oh, the way it was graded.
yeah.
Yeah, there were some questions about that and also about, I guess, about the groundwater elevation as well, so.
Because to me,
Yeah, there are a few
public
things.
hearing, that means neighbors, and so his comments seem to deal with what, some risk he saw possibly for some neighbors, but
We're in the process of actively dealing with those things, so we suspect by the time of the public hearing.
Okay.
Okay.
There was a question raised in the report about access, the number of access, having to do particularly with handicapped access.
Yes.
And we met with Kirk Lehman, the architect, and I met with John Foster about that. And I have a letter from him indicating that the design that we have shown with the handicapped accesses and where they are is acceptable to him, so I can give you a copy of that. Actually, multiple copies.
Thank you.
But all the other items appear to be something technical that we're looking at. By the time of the next meeting, we'll probably have them all addressed.
yes. One for Bob. Kathy.
I have one.
You have one?
Actually, I'll take it for Gary. so-
Okay.
Okay, so Kathy agrees, shall I move a hearing, a public hearing for 2130 East End Holdings for our next meeting?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Before I depart, I just mentioned, I put in a letter requesting an adjournment on Hampton's HDA LLC. I just want to be sure that that was in the file.
Okay.
So,
It is.
For North Sea Road, the corner at North Sea Road?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Open
okay.
Square and North Sea Road. Right, we're
Okay,
still
that's
working on
adjourned?
some issues there.
Okay.
Beechwood Latch is adjourned. John
Okay.
Danielson is adjourned. Hampton's HTA, Mr. Flanagan has just asked us
Asked for
to adjourn
adjournment.
it.
Make a motion that, at the request of the applicant, to adjourn to the June 25th meeting, the 116 North Sea Road application.
21 Gray, I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
And Rogers Memorial
Rogers
Library,
we
we're
did.
done. I know you had a correction to the May 7th. I don't know if Antoinette had a time to do that.
We also have the pre-submission conference with McDonald's.
Oh, I forgot. I didn't have that on
Right.
the
I thought that was
my new
withdrawn.
agenda.
Steve, that
I don't
was
see anybody
withdrawn.
here. Oh, that was withdrawn?
It was withdrawn. They put it in and they took it back,
That's right.
according to
Jackie's.
Jackie. I saw Jackie at noon, and
oh, okay.
Oh, I thought it wasn't on and then it was on.
it went both, all ways. They pulled it back.
Is anybody here to talk about McDonald's?
No, they pulled it back.
You want a Big Mac?
All righty then.
Do we want to approve the minutes for April 30th?
probably missing. I'll move that. I think I made that.
We'll need Antoinette, I know I was here.
I was here.
I think Jane, you were here. I think the three of us were here.
I was here, I know I flew back a day early
Yeah.
to make that one.
Wait, which day?
April
April 30th.
Okay. Roy, Jane, Pam, Alan, and Steve, you were all here.
A motion to approve the minutes as written of April 30th, 2018?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the next meeting is June 25th, work session in this room at 5 PM, followed by the July 2nd public meeting at 5:30 PM. There's no further business. Can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Jane said aye, too.
I did.
Everybody said aye.